Welcome to Jazz Time. JazzTime.com is an online store that buys, sells, trades authentic luxury watches. We make these videos so our customers can easily choose the best watch for themselves in the comfort of their own home. If you like this watch and would like to purchase it at the lowest price anywhere online, click on the link in the description below to buy it at JazzTime.com. Today, I'm going to be reviewing the Rolex Daytona stainless steel with a black dial, special Patrizzi dial, reference 16520. I will tell you a little bit about the history, then tell you about where this watch stands in the lineup of other similar Daytonas, then talk to you specifically about the case bezel dial bracelet movement, and finally try it on and give you my thoughts. So let's start with the history. The Daytona itself has been around for quite some time. It was created approximately in the early 60s, and by now that's already been around 60 years old. And so the Daytona, when it first came out, it was always a chronograph. Rolex was trying to figure out what to name this thing because it is a chronograph that calculates elapsed time. They were going to call it the Le Mans, but the Le Mans is a European race. USA being its biggest market might not recognize what is Le Mans. So they decided to name it after USA's most famous car race, which is the Daytona. A very good idea, since this watch has since gone on to become their most iconic sports line, even exceeding that of the Submariner, the Yachtmaster, and so on. And why is that? Well, first of all, I believe it's because the Daytona is the most complicated watch, and aesthetically it also, in my opinion, looks the best with all this stuff that's going on in it. Okay, at any rate, the Daytona, as you could imagine, has gone through many different variations. The variation that you're looking at in front of you is a reference 16520, which was produced between 1988 and 2000. Let's call that the modern vintage. Before that, they looked quite a bit different. This is the first time they went to 40 millimeters. Before that, they were smaller. And then after this one, from 2000 until 2015, they had this similar version, but a reference 116520. It looks very similar to this, except with the in-house movement and some minor changes. And then they had the first ceramic from 2015 until 2023. That's the first ceramic, with a ceramic bezel, that is. And then they have the current model, which is reference 126500, and that's from 2023 until currently right now, and probably will be produced for the next 10 years. Okay, so this one is quite a bit back, and I'll tell you about the specifics of this watch when I get into it, but that's a little bit about the history. Now, where does this watch stand in the lineup of other Daytonas, which brings us to topic 2. Now, the Daytona they have many different variations of the Daytona, tons, in the Daytona being their most iconic, I would say they're most prestigious. That's a better word to describe it, because iconic is something I would probably reserve for their Datejust or their president, but they're most prestigious. Why do I say most prestigious? Well, because they make the Daytona in their most prestigious metal, which is platinum. That's their most expensive and prestigious metal. So they reserve that for their most prestigious watch, which makes sense. And so as such, the Daytona comes in every single material you can imagine: stainless steel, steel and gold, yellow gold, rose gold, white gold, and even platinum, and different bracelets and different bezels. So they have a lot of variations. Actually, in terms of sports watches, or professional watches as Rolex calls it, the Daytona has the most number of variations, rightfully so, because it is the most prestigious. Now, you might think, well, because it has all these variations, that the base model stainless steel would be the cheapest. Actually, it's the other way around. The stainless steel, even though it is the cheapest in terms of retail, it is actually the most prestigious. Strangely enough, you would think that the gold one or whatever would be, but it's not. It's actually the stainless steel is the most prestigious. So, and of those, what you're looking at here is a very special dial, which is the Patrizzi dial. I'll tell you about it when I talk about the dial itself, but it is special because the subdials and the hour markers have faded over time and produce this sort of cream color, and they'll only continue to fade even more as time goes on. Okay, anyhow, that is where does this watch stand in the lineup? So the stainless steel has always been made in only 2 colors, black or white, and I believe it will probably stay that way. You would think that in other materials like steel and gold, they make many different dial variations, tons of dial variations actually, but in stainless steel they make only 2 variations, black or white. So of those, they've had the generation from 1988 to 2000, which is a 16520, and the other ones I told you about. Okay. So this is the first modern one with this dial. And I guess I forgot to say at the very beginning of the video, this one also has an El Primero Zenith movement. And I'll get into that when I talk about the movement. It's not actually a Rolex in-house movement. It is a movement by the name, as the name suggests, Zenith. And I'll talk to you about it when I get to that. Okay, let's move on to the watch itself. Now, this marks, in 1988, it marks the first time that Rolex has gone to a 40 millimeter case. I believe it was a little bit smaller before that. At 40 millimeters, it's a very good size, and they're not going to change it. And I doubt they will change it anytime, because they have other sports watches that are bigger. But this watch being a kind of a sports watch, and a sleek watch at that, because it's a car racing watch. At least it has its heritage in that. It's supposed to be sleek, which is what it is. So 40 millimeters, it's very, very nice. Very, very nice. And by the way, I want to say, before 1988, before this reference number came out, the movements were actually Valjoux based. Valjoux is another company that provides movements, and they were manual wind. So you would actually have to manually wind it. But in 1988 to 2000, Rolex decided to fit their movements with a Zenith movement, which were made by Zenith and are actually automatic movements, which I believe are better. And after that, in 2000, they came out with their own movement. Yeah, so that was also good. All right, now let's see what is so special about this watch. Well, let's start talking about we talked about the case already. It's 40 millimeters, my thumb to my index finger, and not terribly thick. It's about 12 millimeters thick. Yeah, so it can fit under the suit cuff just fine. All right, now let's talk about the bezel. Now the bezel here is a steel bezel. Now Rolex used steel bezels all the way up until 2015, where they switched over to a ceramic bezel. So the bezel here, it actually allows you to calculate the speed of the car. I'm not exactly sure how it works, to be honest, and it does not move. So you have to look that up yourself. I think if I'm not mistaken, you calculate it by starting the chronograph and calculating 1 kilometer to see how long that takes, and then you can look on the tachymeter scale here to see how fast the car was, or something like that. I'm not really sure because I've never actually used it. Although I've seen hundreds of these Daytonas, I don't think most of us are calculating elapsed time on it. But I will say this: it does look very cool. Okay, and it is made of steel. The benefit of steel is that it looks flush with the rest of the watch, and it also doesn't crack. So if you hit it hard or scratch it, it will scratch, which is not a pleasant thing, but at least it doesn't break. Ceramic will just break. It's hard, but ceramic is hard, but it can break. All right. Anyways, that is the bezel, and that's the only way they made it back in 1988 to 2000. Actually, I would say 1988 to 2015. It was all this style bezel, and it has not changed actually. Okay, now let's talk about the dial, which is really important in this watch, and I'll point out the details, which I would assume you didn't know. That's why you're watching this video. Now, this dial is a Patrizzi dial. Now, you might be scratching your head wondering, why is it called Patrizzi? Okay, I'll explain it to you. On some of the years, not every year, in 1988 to 2000, specifically, I think 1994 to 95, some of those, or most of those, actually, were the dial, that the type of varnish that they used, or which is paint, also called lacquer, was called Zapon. And that Zapon, over time, would, instead of the tracks here were silver before, and over time when they use this kind of lacquer, it would oxidize and it would turn to a brown color or cream color over time as they react with the sunlight. So sun shines on it, and eventually this thing, instead of being a beautiful silver, it would start to turn, it would discolor and turn to this color that you see in front of you, which is cream, and it will continue to do so, along with the hour markers and the subdials, and it will continue to just turn more brown as time goes on. And that actually was a negative thing in Rolex's eyes, so they quickly changed that. They decided, hey, I don't like that. We want this thing to look as it did from the factory, so they changed it. However, during those years, those dials that still remain in product, on the market, they started to discolor over time. And one sort of famous, not a famous collector, but a collector, in 2006 decided, hey, I want to sell this watch. And he put his Daytona out for sale, and it fetched a lot of money. And the reason is because it had this natural varnish or patina that made the watch look vintage, which it is. And it was unique to this watch. Now, each watch will discolor and have a patina over time that is unique to that watch, such that it looks almost like a fingerprint, right? You could, if you saw your watch, you could probably just look at the front of it and tell that, it was yours. So as you could imagine, the uniqueness equals money. And the more patina that had, natural patina, the more desirable and more sought after it would be, and more vintage it would look. So these became really popular, and people start to buy these or want these Zenith Daytonas. All right. And what else I can point out to you on this dial is that the hour markers, they are longer and skinnier than the current version. Now, when they first made them back then like this, the hour markers were long and skinny, and that gave it a vintage look. Or back then it wasn't vintage. That's just how it was done. So in 2000, they started making the hour marker short and fat, very legible. And they did that all the way until 2023 for 23 years. And then they decided, you know what? I actually think the vintage looks good. So they went back to the vintage style. Now all the 2023s, they all have the same look, which is skinny, long hour markers. And the subdials are also skinny. So that's a big change from the modern Daytona. It gives it the modern look on it. All right. And also the hands are skinny. Before, after 2000, the hands got fat. But in 2023, they reverted back to vintage. Okay. So that's another thing about the dial. And I will also point out to you at the bottom of the dial, it says T-Swiss made T. And why is that? Because they actually use tritium, which is radioactive. And as you can imagine, having something radioactive in your watch is not really a good thing. So they stopped doing that. But as you could also imagine, radioactive declines over time. And that also is a reason why it lends to this watch having a patina over time. So it is a true vintage. The dial is very unique in that matter. So if you ever send this watch in to service, tell them do not change the dial, because they will just, toss it out or change it out. And you don't want that. And by the way, if you have this watch in your hand, you're watching this video and you want to sell it, give us a call. We'll buy it. Okay, anyways, that's the dial. Let's move on to the move. Let's look at the bracelet. The bracelet is really not all that unchanged. I mean, it does look different from the 2000 version, but it is your standard Oyster bracelet with this flip-lock buckle, which is kind of an old-school buckle. But that's not a bad thing because, that's how buckles were done back in pre-2000. They had this wide, sort of flat buckle here. It's just your standard Oyster bracelet. Can't say a whole lot about it other than it does not have a comfort extension like the newer models. That I'm not sure that's a big deal. And it's a hollow links as opposed to the really solid links. Okay, let's move on to the movement here. Now, here is something really special. This is what really makes, Rolex, it really makes this watch special in my opinion. I want to open it for you, which is a cool thing about this video, is you get to see the movement. Now, the movement here is actually, it says Rolex. Yes, it is Rolex, but it was made by Zenith. You might be scratching your head wondering, what the heck? Zenith made this movement? Yes, Zenith made this movement. The watch company Zenith. They call it El Primero Zenith movement. And Rolex just re-stamped everything, put their name on it. As you can see here, Montreux, Rolex SA, Geneva, blah, blah, blah. And they put the reference number 4030. So it's a very beautiful movement, actually. It actually does not look that different from the modern one, but it does look older, and it is made by Zenith. So, and it actually, not surprisingly, but it still runs like a champ. Runs very well, very well. Really no issues with it. And so that's just a testimony to how good these movements are, and that's the reason why Rolex used it. And back then, Rolex was not doing it. Rolex was not the massive monster it is today. It's always been good, but it's not the monster that it is today. So at that time, they did not have the capacity to produce chronographs on their own, or they either did or they didn't want to, for whatever reason. I don't know the exact reason. No, probably nobody does, but the fact remains the same. They didn't make the movement themselves, they outsourced it to Zenith, and there must be a reason for that. So, but those movements work great. And in 2000, they finally figured out how to do it themselves, and here you are. But this is a one time that you can buy an original Rolex that did not have a Rolex movement in it. It was rebranded as Rolex. You know, it's like have you ever seen, I think Ferrari or something like that in F1, Honda was using BMW motors or something like that. They were buying the motor from someone else and putting their name on it or something, which you know, that's fine. Actually, Richard Mille does that with AP movements. They subcontract some of their stuff to AP Leloc and have them make the movement, and they put it in their watches. F1 does it. A lot of companies do it. You don't necessarily have to make every part themselves. But anyways, that's what Rolex did back then, and this is the result. A very good movement. All right. Very beautiful rotor, still cut out like the Rolex with these nice gears that you can see. And it looks old school, but looks great. Nice levers, everything. Looks nice. Okay, let's move on. Let's go ahead and try this watch on my wrist. Now look, I'm 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. I have a 7.5 inch wrist, and it fits me just great. I would suggest this watch for anyone who really likes vintage watches, wants to own a piece of history, and wants to have something, you know, very unique, but you know, it's going to hold its value, be iconic. So many things can line up for this watch. I love the dial. I love that the Patrizzi is starting to fade like this. It looks unique. It looks old, vintage, is stylish. I mean, list goes on. You know, I love this watch. So look, if you want to buy this at the lowest price anywhere online, click on the link in the description below to buy it at jazztime.com.
If you want to find out more about the watch you just saw in the video, you can just click below on Show More to see the full description. Then you can check the link next to Model as seen in video, click on it, and you will get to the proper page where you can see all the details. If you're watching on a mobile phone, you have to click on the arrow down on the right hand side below the video to see the full description. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. If you would like to share this video with your friends, you can use the share button below and share it on any platform you like. If you have questions, constructive feedback, want to tell us about some mistakes or misspeaks, just write a comment below. If you want to see more videos like this, you should subscribe to our channel and visit our channel page where you can find all the videos. And if you're interested in a specific watch brand, you can check out our playlists. If you want to check the price for a watch or want to buy one, remember at jazztime.com you always get a steep discount, so you should check the prices with us. If you want to know the price for a specific watch, just go to Google, type in JazzTime, plus the brand, model, and the details you're interested in, and Google will find the right page for you. Thank you for watching.